الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
Hi and welcome to Worlds Apart, a program that is committed to speaking the truth in love. I'm your host, Ramal Hussain, and today we have with us Dr. David Smith, who will be speaking to us about ideologies that are truly worlds apart. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you very much, Ramal.
It's a real pleasure to be able to have you come here and
Good.
share some of your insights with us.
Good.
Now, as we've been going through these episodes, we've been discussing some really tough questions. And I think today will be one of the most difficult questions to be able to answer. What I would like to concentrate on is specifically showing the differences between Christian and Islamic martyrdom. Can we start off first, please, by defining what a martyr is?
Indeed. It's a word, of course, that has only come into the language through the Greek community originally. We go back a couple of thousand years for that. And the idea of the martyr, certainly in Greek society, was that it was a person willing to die for the sake of Greek philosophy, so as to promote that philosophy. Now, as time has moved on, that's a couple of thousand years ago, the term has been picked up and used, you might well say, in three ways. It's always in respect to death. That is, that a person is willing to die when under threat about that person's religion. And saying, I will not change from my religious base. And if you want to kill me for that reason, then so be it. Or, secondly, it could be that the person is standing up for another person. So, for instance, for Christians, their position during the last couple of thousand years has been quite specifically that Jesus is their Lord and Saviour, and they do not want anybody to counter that. And so they'll say, if you want to kill me because I believe in Jesus, then so be it. There is a third category, and that is people who want to stand up for an ideology. And particularly perhaps in Latin America we've seen that, but also in Spain in earlier times. But revolutionary people of whatever sort, certainly even in communist days, we have seen it and to some extent still see it today. Where people who want to maintain the ideological stance are willing even to die for it. And if they die, then that is the reason. Now, the thing is, what is the reason for martyrdom? It's one thing to be willing to die, but usually it's for a purpose. Why do you want to kill me? Well, in the case of the ideology, most people would, of course, I suppose, want to back out and say, no, I don't believe in that ideology to the point you want to kill me. But on the other hand, there are many who are willing to die because they believe that by the death of themselves for the sake of the ideology, it helps to promote the ideology. Because then people who haven't been killed will say, look, he died for that reason, and therefore let us on his behalf or her behalf fight on and really push this ideology as strongly as we can. So in fact, there is a real reluctance by, let's say, a national force, whether it's a police force or some other authoritarian force, not to kill for the sake of ideology, because if you do, you actually may well promote it. We've seen that particularly, if I may dare to say so, in South Africa with apartheid. And quite often there were black South Africans who were killed because they were promoting against apartheid. They say, just the fact we're black or we're coloured makes no difference to those who are white. We're all the same. You should treat us all as people. And they got killed for it. Now, being killed for it, it helped those who were continuing to fight against apartheid. So their purpose, you might say, was to promote a change in the social philosophy. Now, those who die for the sake of a person, such as those who've been criticised for following Jesus as their Lord and Saviour, which happened almost immediately after Christ's death. The Roman government, way back there in the 1st century AD, were very unhappy about people regarding Jesus as their Lord, because their argument was, Caesar is Lord. And you must bring incense in front of Caesar and declare him to be Lord. You can't go saying somebody else is Lord.
He was king.
Yes.
That's right.
And therefore, if you're going to regard this person who was put on a cross way over there in that little funny little colonial place we call Palestine, well, you'll die for it. But it's so simple, you don't have to die for it. Just simply regard me, the king, Caesar, as Lord. And they wouldn't do it. And so they were martyred. And I think there is an argument, although it may be hard to prove it, that because so many, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of people in that 1st century who were martyred, that in fact the Christian message spread rapidly across Europe. And the church grew enormously.
For that reason.
For that reason. Now the third, or what I was picking up first of all, the first reason, if you like, is those who are dying for a faith or a religion. And if they die for religion, then the question is, for what purpose? Now in the case of, let's say, Hinduism, you very rarely get anybody willing to die for the sake of Hinduism. But if they did, it would be on the grounds that they will be reincarnated, and by dying for the sake of Hinduism, they'll come back at a higher level, and so be a better person when they come back, when they're reincarnated.
So is that to do with the casting system?
Well, the caste is tied up with that,
Okay.
because when they come back, that means they will be in a higher caste.
Okay.
But the real principle is reincarnation. But casting is definitely part of it. Well, then you could look at another religious base, such as Islam. And the lure for martyrdom in Islam is so that one can get into heaven. You see, there's no guarantee about getting to heaven as a Muslim. You long for it, you hope for it, and Muhammad speaks about it. In fact, he mentions there are 7 different heavens. And if you really want to get into the top heaven, then you can only be sure of that if, in fact, you kill a person who's not a Muslim.
But I mean, when we discussed in an earlier episode and we spoke about the tenets or the pillars of Islam, surely if you pray, if you tithe, or I shouldn't say tithe, but you
give some of your money,
give some of your money, and that's dispersed to the poor and so on,
That's
and
right.
you know, you help other people, and you pray 5 times a day, you do all the things that are required
That's
of
right.
you. Surely that will get you favour with God, and you'll get into heaven.
Well, one would hope so, but in fact there's no guarantee in the Quran. That Muhammad himself never gave any guarantee. There is no sense of assurance.
Why is that?
Well, it's amazing. You see, on what grounds would one have assurance? If there is such a place as heaven, how do I know I'm going to get there? I mean, I could take an, well, everybody's going to get into heaven, so it doesn't matter, and therefore I can do as many bad things as I like, and therefore people like Hitler will get there, and everybody else will get there.
Like a universalistic type of
That's right.
approach,
You see? So that could be an argument that you could take. I guess the argument I more commonly get would be people who say there's nothing. You know, once you're dead, you're dead. You're going to push up daisies, you know, that's the end of it. Well, that's an interesting idea. Again, there's no proof of it. And in fact, if God has come to us, and if he has declared to us that there is a continuity for each one of us, that is, I'm not simply a body, flesh, that I'm actually a person. You can translate that into the word soul, or you may want to translate to the word spirit, but the point is that I'm a person that will go on even after I shed my earthly body. Well then, where will this soul, where will this personhood, where will I be? Now, I can only be sure that I will be somewhere if, in fact, whoever's in charge of the somewhere has told me. And so, you see, that's the big difference for the Christian faith, that God has come to us. As I look at other religions, and I've spent time, as you may well know, in other countries with people, particularly like in India with Hinduism, or in Asia with Buddhism, they're all searching after, trying to find the divine. With Hinduism, there are numerous numbers of divinities of all sorts of manifestations. With Buddhism, there's technically no divine, but it depends which brand of Buddhism. There are some elements of it. But the fact is then with Christianity, God has come to us. We're not trying to find him, he's finding us. He's declared his hand. He has shown himself through the history, which has been recorded for us in the Bible, the history of a group of people that he called out to be a special nation, and through whom his promises and his warnings would be carried out. So here was evidence of truth. But then he came to us in the person of Jesus. And Jesus actually walked this earth. And I've had the privilege, as some others have, of actually being where Jesus walked this earth. Seeing where he actually was.
In Israel.
In Israel,
Yes.
in Jerusalem,
yeah.
in Galilee, in Nazareth. And so I know it's evidence, and there's historical evidence, that he did walk this earth. Well, then if Jesus did come to us, then did he make certain promises? Did he say something about the long-term future? Well, he did. And he makes it clear that indeed, in due course, he will return to be with his Father in heaven. And therefore we, if we belong to him, will be with him. And the ultimate evidence of that was when he was actually being crucified on the cross by the Roman soldiers, that there was a person on each side of him also being crucified for reasons that they were thieves. One of them just rejected him, but the other one said, you know, I do believe in you, Jesus, that you really are the person who's come to enable me to belong to you. And he turned to that thief and he said, yes, this day you will be with me in paradise. Now that thief did nothing specially. He didn't go killing other people. He didn't go doing anything especially good.
So why should he deserve heaven or paradise?
Why should he deserve it? Only because he believed in Jesus. Which is an amazing point. That it means that one is accounted righteous, is accounted as belonging to Jesus. Rather than having to do, it'd be nice to do a lot of good things if you can. He, of course, had no opportunity for that. At that moment, he suddenly met Jesus and he believed in him. And he said, I accept who you are. And you can be my Lord and Saviour. And Jesus said, yes, this day you will be with me in paradise. So we have the evidence there is a heaven and that we can be with Jesus and with God the Father in heaven merely because we are accounted righteous, not because we necessarily are righteous, not because we've done the 5 pillars of Islam or we followed the noble path of the Buddhist, which is their concept, to do all these noble things that might get you into something better. Of course, for them it's reincarnation. But ultimately, reincarnation leads to nirvana, which is the ultimate result. But that doesn't get you. So the only way you can have any sense of assurance is that God has come to us and said, if you want to believe in me as your Lord and Saviour, I will have you. And whenever I shed my earthly body, you'll be with me in heaven.
Okay, so is it the same thing? Is that what you're saying essentially, that being a Christian martyr or a Muslim martyr, it's the same thing? It's just laying your life down for what you believe?
It's laying down your life for what you believe, but then the question is whether there is a reason for it. In the case of the Muslim, there is a reason. It's the lure of paradise. His only chance of getting into paradise is by doing that. Now that's supported in the Quran, and I could put some Quranic references up later so that people can see that. In the case of a Christian, he's simply laying down his life because he's being threatened. If you're a Christian, you've got to change. If you won't change, I'll kill you. It's very interesting because Jesus himself said this would happen. Can I give you a text? Have I got time?
Please do, yes.
Because, here's just one example, that when Jesus was with his own disciples, he just simply made the point. This is from John's Gospel, chapter 15 and verse 18. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you're not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember these words. In other words, Jesus is saying, okay, in due course, the Romans are going to put me on the cross. They're hating me. And not only the Romans, which was so, of course, for the first 3 centuries hated the Christians and also killed them. But in the hundreds of years later, this would continue to be so, and is still so today. And so the reason is not the allure of paradise. The reason is just simply to let people know that Jesus matters.
So these people, these extremists, radicals, fanaticals, whatever you want to call them, that strap themselves, and I know I'm going to a very particular area here.
Right.
I'm not trying to say that, all Muslims are like this,
No.
without a shadow of doubt, but there is a group of people
Sure.
who say that, this is a form of martyrdom when you strap yourself with bombs.
Yes.
And it's not just a case of laying your life down, but it's also killing or murdering
Yes.
a whole bunch of other people.
Yes.
Are they martyrs?
They are martyrs. I mean, they may be suicide killers. I mean, they're killing themselves as well as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not martyrs quite in the sense in that a martyr is somebody who has been killed by another, whereas in their case they're killing themselves. So that's really a suicide. And even Muhammad raises a question about that. He took the position that you should not commit suicide. But on the other hand, he also took the position that you ought to kill others. Now that pops up in the Quran a number of times, and later on I might just put along the bottom some evidence of that from the Quran. So there is a slight difference. Suicide bombing, as it's generally referred to by the extremists, is an act which actually is not really supported by Muhammad as far as the suicide bit. What Muhammad is supporting is that everybody should become a Muslim. And if you do not become a Muslim, then one of the options, having given you the opportunity to change, is then to kill you. There are other options, and maybe on another occasion we could talk about the option, particularly what we call the dhimmi, which is the option to come to an agreement that I will let you live, but in a very humble way, and making certain requirements of you because you've refused to be killed. So there are other options. But the suicide bombing doesn't really have strong Mohammedan support. On the other hand, I know of people, particularly in Palestine, who've suicided to kill people on the Israeli side of the border, mainly to get out of local problems, because they know by suicide bombing there's every chance they may well go to heaven. So the lure of paradise becomes the dominating feature.
Whereas, how is that different for a Christian? It's not about going to heaven, so what do they do it?
So the point with the Christian is they don't, of course, do suicide killing. They are being threatened by some other persons who want them to give up being a Christian and be something else. If they're in India, it may well be to become Hindus. If they're in the Middle East, it may well be to become Muslims. If they're in a communist country, it may well be just to stop being a Christian, be a good atheist. And that Christian is simply saying, I belong to Jesus.
What's the lure? What's the cause? Why are they willing to do it?
Yes, for no other reason than just saying, I will not stand aside for Jesus. I will not put his name down. I will not treat him as if he didn't exist. He's not dirt. He matters to me. I belong to him, and I'm going to continue to stand for him. If you want to kill me, that's your problem. But I'm going to go on standing up for Jesus. So the lure is very minimal. I mean, it's really just simply saying, Jesus matters to me. And there's no advantage. You'll go to heaven regardless. So if it's not for getting to heaven, okay, I suppose you could argue that does it promote the Christian faith more strongly? Well, there have been some historical examples where that has occurred. But if you're the person about to get killed, you don't know that. And you're not getting killed for that reason. I mean, none of us want to get killed if we can avoid it.
So it's an absolute definite that a Christian who goes out to cause some type of act of violence in the attempt of killing someone else, they are not clearly a martyr. No. From what I'm hearing from you,
yes.
it's them who are being subjected to violence.
Yes, because they're suiciding.
Okay.
And if you're suiciding, that really is a different category.
Okay. But if I can ask you this question, was Jesus a martyr or was he more?
Well, I'd have to ultimately say he was more, but you could start by saying he was a martyr in that the Romans put him on the cross for no good reason. than that he said he was the King of the Jews. And of course they didn't like anybody holding that title as against the Caesar. But on the other hand, it happened because he had already planned for it to happen. So in that sense, he wasn't a martyr. He was indeed, to use his word, he was the Saviour. It was through his death, all previously planned, that he would die on my behalf and on behalf of everybody listening in or wherever around the world, so that if they accepted that free gift of forgiveness, they could belong to him. Now, the reason for dying was to make it clear that if you ignore God, or if you behave as if God doesn't exist, or if you treat God as if he really doesn't matter, that is in fact what God calls sin. And therefore you're saying, I don't care about God, I'm just me. Well, then how do you overcome that? God could just come to us and say, well, there, you know, you're a nice boy and you didn't mean to do that, you know, and you'll be all right. But he didn't. He said there's a price to pay. And that price to pay is indeed death. But rather than me dying for treating God as if he doesn't matter, God's dying through Jesus. And by him accepting the death on the cross, which he had planned, and because he was perfect, because indeed he was God, therefore his death is applicable to everybody who simply claims it for themselves. All you have to do is to say, yes, Jesus, I want you to be my Lord and my Saviour. And when you make that decision, that means you've just simply accepted a free gift. You belong to him eternally.
Wow.
And as a result, the peace of God starts then to flood your heart and mind, and you realise what incredible peace you have, because you now have real assurance. You're not trying to grab assurance some other way.
And it makes no difference if you're a martyr or not.
It doesn't matter at all, because you've got that assurance, and that's a guaranteed assurance.
Now, did Jesus ask his disciples to be martyrs?
No, but he knew that they would be. He knew they would be hated, but he never said, that's the purpose of what you're doing. He wanted them to get out there and to share the good news, but he knew there would be problems of doing so.
And why does God allow them to die in such a way? I mean, martyrdom really, in the biblical sense, is such a humiliating thing.
It is. Well, Jesus himself died on the cross. I mean, you can't really get a more humiliating way of being killed. And so he's saying, yes, for the sake of other people knowing that you really do believe in me, it may help them. And if I interfered and stopped your killings, then the question would be, well, why don't I interfere with all forms of evil and stop all evil, which he could do. But if he did, then suddenly we become robots. We're no longer free people. We're not making our own decisions. We're simply letting God make decisions for me so I don't do anything bad. And God said, no, I don't want you to be robots. I want you to choose to belong to me. And you can choose not to belong to me. But to choose to belong to me means that there will be consequences. And people won't like you for it.
Thank you once again. We've run out of time. I always love when you come and you share some of your insights with us and you're able to answer some of these tough questions. I think we've been able to see clearly that there is a difference between Christian and Islamic martyrdom. And I think more than anything, it's really good to be able to expose these things, because often people will tar them with the same brush. They'll think, oh, a martyr is a martyr. But you've been able to show that people can die for different reasons and different causes. However, what I felt and sensed from what you're saying is that a Christian is someone who is willing to die, but that does not guarantee them or give them anything. They simply do this on account of the relationship they have with Jesus, perhaps the love that they have with him. They're not trying to make a statement. They're not trying to do anything. I mean, if you know, the church grows as a result of that, if people are encouraged because of that, they can see someone with a bold and strong faith, well, so be it. But that's not really the reason. And I think that that's really important to be able to take that away. Thank you once again.
Good.
If I can just turn to our audience, and I really pray and hope that you found this episode to be informative. If you have any more questions, please check out the website, which will pop up on the screen, to be able to look into some of these things that we were discussing. But until then, please stay in tune for the very next episode, and may the Lord bless you. Goodbye.